Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 17th of July, and as always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information. You can always find that at 1-800-472-0391. That's the Alaska Weather Information Line. The weather.gov/Alaska website always has links to your latest information where you are in your part of Alaska. You can check on the river stages from the Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center, the Aviation Weather Unit's information for general aviation. And if you can't find what you're looking for, feel free to send me an email right there at david.snider@noaa.gov. I'm happy to help you get set up and steer you in the right direction. Let's take a look at what's going on around Alaska, up across the northwestern coast, south and west of Wainwright, all the way down to Cape Krusenstern. High surf advisory is posted. This is going to go through tomorrow evening around 6 o'clock. Probably the worst of it will be as we head in through Wednesday morning, and then conditions will slowly improve as we go through the afternoon tomorrow. But the main concern is that waves are going to run up to the top of the beach here, and that surf will be strong. There could be some coastal erosion with it, and it's all due to a storm system moving across the Chukchi Sea, where gales are going to be found out across the open water. As this sweeps across from the west and southwest, we expect that to bring in some stronger winds, and because of that, the surf will be pretty high, again, washing up to the top of the beach in many cases there. So if you've got things that are closer to the coast and near the beach in those areas, including the northern sections of the Seward Peninsula all the way up toward Wainwright, conditions are going to be pretty rough for about the next 24 hours there. So make sure you are doing what you need to do to keep you and your property safe as we go ahead through this kind of a rough 24-hour period there. After that, again, conditions should improve through tomorrow afternoon, and then certainly by Wednesday night and into Thursday, but it will still be a little breezy. Let's take a look at fire danger there from our friends over at the BLM. They tell us that conditions are still pretty dry up across the upper Yukon Valley. In fact, dry enough that we're going to draw in that extreme level once again there. Most other areas in south central, certainly southeast, southwest, and some of the western interior, conditions have improved with the last several weeks of wetter weather moving in. And again, another slug of rainfall will likely work its way up across the north slope. So conditions may improve here a little bit later on in the week. But for right now, extreme fire danger there across the upper Yukon, and a broader area of even high fire danger all the way across the Alcan border and then back toward the west, generally north of Fairbanks and east of Bettles. Here's what's going on as far as satellite pictures go. You'll notice that we have this broad southwesterly flow working its way in through the Chukchi Sea. That's just kind of the beginning of what's going to move through the region. A look out to the west shows several other waves of low pressure working through the Bering Sea. High pressure is trying to build in quickly behind it, but overall, it's going to bring a much warmer period to the west coast and the northwest for sure. You'll see that when we check on the current temperatures or the temperature forecaster coming up. Across southeast, we've seen some cloud cover building up today, some areas of light rainfall across the southern parts of southeast. The overall west to easterly flow helping to move these weather disturbances on in kind of a quick fashion. Low pressure is also found across the northern Gulf. The remnants of that really are still allowing some instability to be found across south central, meaning clouds are having an easier time bubbling up. And once again this afternoon we've seen some showers and maybe even an opportunity for a thunderstorm here across parts of the southern Susitna Valley. By and large, though, the bulk of the activity for any thunderstorm or convection activity will be out here across western parts of Canada. This is where more of the heating is taking place, and still a little bit more of that opportunity for those clouds to bubble up out to our north and our east. Across the central and western chain, we have plenty of cloud cover here. Here's a look at the weather map with a front laid on top of it. High pressure is sitting across the northern Gulf. There are some weak areas of low pressure here, just the remnants again as I was talking about. Low pressure sitting across the southern parts of southeast, some light rain with that. High pressure up across the north slope. This will weaken and move eastward right now, though, sitting at around 1,019 millibars. And then the storm that we're watching is already producing gales across the Chukchi Sea at 991 millibars. That will crank up the strong south and southwesterly flow across the northwest coast, all the way from Wainwright down toward Cape Krusenstern once again at around Point Hope and Point Lay. And that is going to create periods of high surf. The waves could run up to the top of the beach in this case. So high surf advisories are posted for the entire Chukchi coast and then down across the northern parts of the Seward Peninsula. That'll go until Wednesday night around 6 o'clock at this point. Ahead of that, periods of rain, drizzle, and fog are expected as high pressure shifts to the south and southeast. Should have a generally clear sky across many parts of south central and southwestern Alaska, though the further away you get from this, we may start to run into a little more fog around parts of Bristol Bay, up toward Togiak, the YK Delta, and then back toward the west, we start to get into a better chance of rainfall for the central and eastern chain, the Alaska Peninsula, all the way out toward Sand Point. Watch for showers across parts of southeast, hit and miss really across the north and southern parts of southeast, nothing too heavily focused in one area. By Wednesday, still a broad area of generally light rain showers for parts of southeast. That broad area of clearing shifts eastward a little bit more, so folks up around Eagle, northway down toward Kenai Peninsula, Cooper Landing, south toward the Kodiak Island region, Lake Iliamna, and west to probably King Salmon, maybe Dillingham. We'll see a generally clear sky for your Wednesday. Up north, though, not the case. Look at plentiful rain across the north slope, the northwest coast for sure. The western end of the Seward Peninsula probably catching Nome in on some of the wetter weather. And you'll notice again that flow that we're looking at with the black lines, the isobars or lines of constant pressure, are squeezing together, angling that wind in a little bit more from the west and northwest. So cooler weather will set in, and visibilities and ceilings are going to go down as we go. So get your flying done early and then get set to stay put probably on Wednesday as levels come crashing down, at least for a while on Wednesday. Out to the west, low pressure sitting just south and west of Shemya at 1,013 millibars, trying to work its way into the Bering. As we get into Thursday, though, it doesn't make a whole lot of forward progress, so we'll probably see rain, clouds, and maybe a little bit of a wind shift as we look at Adak and perhaps Atka, though. You're sitting right on top of the ridge, so conditions probably won't change a whole lot here. South of Unalaska and Dutch Harbor, 1,015 millibar low sits to your south. It's going to draw up a little bit more of a south and southeasterly breeze. That flow coming in off the Pacific there will probably bring rain to places like Cold Bay, False Pass, up towards Sand Point, maybe not quite to western ends of Kodiak Island. Still looking at showers, likely focusing on central and southern parts of southeast toward the Dixon entrance. High pressure across southern Yukon will likely try and nudge some drier air down toward Yakutat and maybe into the capital city. Showers forming across the northern Alaska range will sit tight. This area is going to see more sunshine and more heat compared to what we see just to the north with the remaining boundary of that cool push coming in off the Arctic that's going to pretty much stop right over the Brooks Range. It'll focus clouds and rainfall there, allow cooler, drier winds to work in behind it, but not make a whole lot more further southern progress. So that's going to keep the chance for instability, or showers and maybe even a thunderstorm forming across northern parts of the Alaska Range and maybe southward into the northern Susitna Valley. We'll just have to keep an eye on how that develops as we head into Thursday and Friday if conditions continue to not change. Let's take a quick check of temperatures as we get into Wednesday morning. Temps overnight in the lower 50s for southeast, upper 40s for southwest, the chain, the Alaska Peninsula, about 50 or so for Kodiak. 40s for the middle Tanana Valley around North Pole southward, upper 40s to almost 50 degrees around Kenai Peninsula and Anchorage up north. 30s and 40s, a very mild night for the North Slope. Kotzebue Sound temps in the 40s and 50s as well, Nome 48, high of 52 for your Wednesday. 70s for many sections of the interior and southwest, upper 60s, low to mid 70s for parts of south central. Overnight lows Wednesday morning, a little cooler for the northwest coast with that colder air setting in, mid 30s for you, low 50s in southeast, and highs still warm on Thursday.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to aviation weather now, I do expect a broad area of IFR through the Bering Strait and over St. Lawrence Island, and then hit and miss out across the Bering Sea, generally west of the Pribilofs and west of Nikolsky, maybe even Dutch Harbor in Alaska as we get your Wednesday morning started. Over the Gulf, most of the visibility and ceiling issues are going to be out over the open water, but you'll see some of that approaching places like Icy Cape up toward Yakutat and into Cross Sound, all the way down to about Sitka and almost Point Alexander. The rest of southeast looks pretty good. Most of the interior, south central and southwest looks pretty good. And even the Brooks Range looks mostly good until you get out toward the Kobuk and Noatak valleys and up through Utqiagvik and west toward Point Hope and Point Lay. By the afternoon, you'll notice IFR spreading eastward into the Beaufort Seacoast now, so changes will be coming your way as the next wave of weather works up out of the Chukchi and quickly moves across the North Slope. So plan for that. It will be warmer, but visibilities are going to be changing there. St. Lawrence Island all the way down toward the Pribilofs and most of the chain, all looking at IFR through your Wednesday afternoon again. This is not going to be a morning pattern. This will be changes in the afternoon. And MVFR is sneaking up the upper Koyukuk through the Norton Sound region all the way down toward Cape Newenham. And MVFR also spreading into the Gulf Coast with IFR conditions across the open waters of the Gulf and also to about Sandpoint and west. As we get into Thursday, more widespread IFR across more of the Gulf, and that includes southern parts of southeast now, maybe areas around the Juneau vicinity and up north all the way through the Brooks Range and the Beaufort and parts of the northern Chukchi coast, through the Bering Strait, St. Lawrence Island, all the way through the Bering Sea. And again, most of the Aleutians and the Pacific coasts of the Alaska Peninsula and a large chunk of Kodiak Island. Once again, though, a huge area of the interior, southwest and south central looking to be VFR through your Thursday morning and into Thursday afternoon. Some improvement for southeast as we get into Thursday afternoon. Look for MVFR to linger across the southern third of the Panhandle. IFR conditions across the Chukchi and into the eastern Beaufort Seacoast with MVFR fairly widespread across the Brooks Range, the upper Koyukuk, and a large part of the YK Delta. And into Nunivak Island, we start to see IFR there wrapping around and getting close to the Pribilof, so you'll be flirting with that most of the day. And then most of the chain, also looking at IFR conditions as we go. Here's your past conditions in detail now. We're expecting to see VFR to MVFR as we get through your Wednesday. They're also expecting to see some improvements for Adigan Pass, VFR conditions to MVFR conditions there. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass looking to see VFR throughout the day. Rainy Pass all the way through Windy and Isabel Pass looking really good through your Wednesday. Mentasta Pass, visual flight rule should be expected all day long. Tanita Pass looking good, and Portage Pass looking A-OK. Prince William Sound looks pretty good. Chilkoot and White Pass also expecting to be okay. Thursday, though, that's going to start to be different there, so keep your eyes on that for southeast as we go through the rest of the week. In the meantime, things are warming up. A lot of really warm air finding its way into western Alaska. You notice levels here anywhere from 10,000 feet all the way up to the western side of the Brooks Range, Alaska Range, 12,000 feet west of St. Matthew and the Pribilofs, 14,000 feet for the western chain. And even the eastern interior levels are still rebounding after that last wave went through, but 6,000 to 8,000 foot levels there for the eastern half of Alaska and even southeast Alaska, pretty high up there. So it is going to be warm. Icing potential has isolated moderate, also pretty high up there, levels at or above 10,000 feet for the North Slope as we get through your Wednesday afternoon. Today that hasn't been the case. They're going to be a lot lower than that, but I think we're going to see a big change as those levels start to go up as the next wave of warmth spreads in with the system coming out of the Chukchi moving across the north. Now across the southern Bering Sea, around the Pribilofs, through the central and eastern chain into the Alaska Peninsula, all the way out towards Sandpoint, levels there also are going to be pretty high up there. In fact, some areas were indicating anywhere from 14,000 to 15,000 feet. So most of you are probably flying below 10,000 feet. We'll just leave it there. 7 to about 10,000 feet for northern areas of southeast, but even this is probably a little bit of a stretch downward. So you're probably okay with that being above 10,000 feet by Wednesday afternoon. Most areas in south central not seeing much of a problem. Jet stream has a low across the northern Gulf. High pressure trying to build in. This is going to be our game changer for the rest of the week. Pretty warm weather with southwesterlies across the north slope as we go through your Wednesday. You can see that building in with a zonal or westerly flow. Our ridge building in here. Strongest winds across the north slope and the central and western chain. A northerly flow for southeast here. The same goes for 3,000 feet. Light winds from the south and east. From the northwest, I should say, across southeast with high pressure building across the Gulf. Weak low pressure south of Unalaska and Dutch Harbor and stronger winds out to the west and a broad west and southwesterly flow for the northern half, 20 to 40 knots there. Turbulence, that's where we're going to find it, below 4,000 feet. Considerable moderate for a considerable area of northern Alaska and also across the western chain. South central, southwest, and southeast look to be A-OK for turbulence as we go forward.
Technology. It's the rhythm of our everyday life. We're more dependent on satellite and communication systems than at any other time in history. Disruptions can affect our economy and even our safety. To prepare for the effects of such events and minimize impacts, we need to look outside our atmosphere, some 93 million miles away, at a star we call the Sun. It's our main energy source. It warms the Earth and grows our food. While the Sun and the space between may seem pleasant from our perspective, it's anything but peaceful. At its surface exists a chaotic state of eruptions and radiation. And unlike Vegas, what happens at the sun doesn't stay at the sun.
Space weather is essentially emissions from the sun, radiation, magnetic field that erupts from the solar surface, pumped out into space, sometimes right towards Earth. When it impacts the Earth, it impacts our technology. That's what we call space weather.
These solar events and their effects at Earth can disrupt systems we take for granted, from causing blackouts to the power grid, to delaying offshore drilling operations due to inaccurate GPS data. Interference with communication systems can force air traffic to reroute and impact rescue response and coordination. Outside our atmosphere, solar radiation can harm astronauts and the systems they depend on. The good news is that these eruptions can be detected early. Forecasters at the NOAA Space Weather Prediction Center in Boulder, Colorado, have their eyes on the sun at all times.
The Space Weather Prediction Center is part of the National Weather Service and is very much like a normal weather forecast office. We're here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We're looking at data, we're looking at imagery, we're looking at model outputs. As conditions develop, we put out alerts, warnings, and watches of imminent activity to our customers so they can take action.
In many ways, forecasting space weather is a lot like forecasting hurricanes. Those who rely on space weather forecasts, like electric power grid managers, are informed early on and can begin taking protective action.
When we see an eruption on the sun, space weather forecasters will issue a watch. This is much like a hurricane watch. When a hurricane sits offshore of Miami, for example, perhaps 48 hours out, we too can see way in advance that something may be coming towards the Earth.
As the storm moves toward us, it hits a monitoring spacecraft orbiting 1 million miles away from Earth.
It's kind of our buoy sitting out there offshore, and that hurricane about 30, 45 minutes before it makes landfall, we'll get the measurements from the buoy. That's what this spacecraft does for us. That big eruption that left the sun hits the spacecraft. Now we've got the measurements of exactly what's going to impact us here on Earth, and we issue the warnings to give the power grid a heads up that the storm is now imminent. An interesting element to this whole process is that when the forecasters issue the alert, the power grid receives the alert, takes the necessary actions to protect the grid, and the average citizen never knows anything ever happened.
The number of customers who rely on space weather information continues to grow. As our reliance on technology increases, so will our need for constant monitoring of the sun.
Space weather affects technologies. As conditions develop, we put out alerts, warnings, and watches to our customers so they can take action.
GPS has changed society. Most people don't realize how remarkable and how many different applications there are.
The GPS has become an integral part, not just of our daily lives as far as cell phones and guidance for our cars and mapping, but the whole system in agriculture is really relying heavily on high accuracy GPS.
So they're using GPS to plant those seeds with centimeter accuracy. And then they can come behind it and irrigate and fertilize right where that seed is with that 1 centimeter accuracy.
The GPS creates a line for the operator that he can steer along, or you go to another level and the operator doesn't steer anymore and the tractor has an automatic steering system on it, much like a cruise control on a car, except for when I push the button, it doesn't drive a set speed. When I push a button, it stays on a predefined line.
You don't even need lights. You can do it at nighttime. You program your GPS and it's driving that tractor for you. So it's huge, and it's changing the way that the farmers farm the fields.
6 or 7 days out.
There's an interest in GPS applications from space weather side because when the sun is eruptive, it causes GPS to falter, and in some cases it doesn't work at all.
Productivity may suffer to a certain degree in that there's no way that I, as a human being, can steer as good 8 hours a day as a GPS system's going to do. It's going to be the same all day long. Some of the other application technologies, those are going to be gone. We're not going to have the ability to do good section control on sprayers and planters and fertilizer applicators without GPS.
We see a huge growing customer base in so many different industries, so many different sectors now relying on GPS and high precision GPS. They're all big customers for us.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
On to your marine weather now, starting off with sea ice. You can see from our Alaska Sea Ice program that we're starting to see a lot more marginal ice along the coast from the Beaufort Sea and still west of Barrow toward Wainwright and Utqiagvik. You can see that the conditions are changing slowly, but we're getting to that point now in the next several weeks that if we're going to have some openings along the coast, this is where it's going to happen. So this thin layer of blue is the marginal ice zone. Those are concentrations of ice below 80% or up to at least that 80% mark. It doesn't necessarily apply to the thickness of the ice that's in that marginal ice zone, but we would estimate there that the ice thickness is also decreasing as long as the coverage is decreasing as well. You can check this map, zoom in, zoom out, check your bay and area of interest, and plot your course a little bit there with some of this information. Weather.gov/Anchorage/ice for the update from the 17th of July. On to southeast now. Winds are fairly light across the outer coast. North and westerly winds 3 to 4 foot seas there across the outer coast. Light winds on the inside. More of a southerly flow coming up through the Lynn Canal, 15 knots with 3 foot seas there on Wednesday. As we get into Thursday, really not much of a change. You'll see winds picking up a little bit more south of Sitka. 20 knots there from the northwest, 5 to maybe 6 foot seas at their highest, 2 to 3 foot seas on the inside, with somewhat of a variable flow around Petersburg down toward Ketchikan, and we're still holding onto those light southerly winds in the Lynn Canal, 15 knots with 3 foot seas. Across south central, small seas and small winds for the region. Light westerly flow inside of Prince William Sound, 2 foot seas there, 2 to 3 foot seas as you head down from Kenai down toward the western Barren Islands, and still looking at small seas outside of Resurrection Bay toward the eastern Barren Islands and the northern Gulf, only 2 to 3 foot seas there. A little bit of an increase as we get into Thursday. South and westerly winds 10 to 15 knots should be expected in all areas. 3 to 4 foot seas across the Cook Inlet region. South and westerly winds bringing 3 to 4 foot seas across the northern Gulf, and still looking at light winds, small seas inside of Prince William Sound as winds blow in from the southwest. For the Alaska Peninsula, expect a south and easterly wind feeding into low pressure there, 20 to 25 knots across the southern end with 3 to 7 foot seas there, the highest of which will be along the Pacific coast. Inside of Shelikof Strait, southwesterlies at 15 knots, 3 foot seas there, and 10 to 15 knot winds elsewhere with 2 to 3 foot seas continuing. For Thursday, winds still holding from the southwest inside of Shelikof Strait, 15 knots and 3 foot seas. An east and southeasterly wind coming over the Alaska Peninsula, 15 to as high as 25 knots, the highest of which will be south and west of Sandpoint along the Pacific coast. Look for 7 foot seas there along the Pacific. And into Bristol Bay, 3 foot seas should be expected for your Thursday as winds blow in out of the east and off the land, and 3 foot seas as you head down the Bering Sea coast as well for Thursday. For the Aleutian chain, a southeasterly flow sneaking in across the north and eastern sections of the chain north of Unalaska. Otherwise, more of a broad westerly flow all the way out toward Kiska and Shemya, generally 15 knots at about 20 knots there south of the chain into the Pacific coast. 6-foot seas for the Pacific coast, 3 to 4-foot seas in most areas along the Bering. You'll see some higher seas as you get out toward Kiska, toward Adak on Wednesday. And then a south and westerly wind kicks in with the next weather system coming in from the west. Look for 20 to 25 knots there, 7 to 8-foot seas. And shifting winds here across the central and eastern chain. A light southwesterly wind feeding in, but effects of high pressure changing the wind flow a little bit out here. 15 to 20 knots in most areas, and 3 to 6-foot seas as you head out toward either side of Unalaska. For the west coast, south and westerly winds coming into Norton Sound, looking for 15 to 25 knots there. 3 to 7-foot seas should be expected. Light easterly winds for St. Paul and St. George, 5-foot seas for your Wednesday, and you'll see those diminish as we get into Thursday. A southwesterly float, 10 knots, should bring you 3-foot seas. 3 to 5-foot seas here across the northern parts of the Bering into Norton Sound. You'll notice that the winds are coming up a little bit more, and that's all feeding into the low pressure system up across the Chukchi Sea. And this is where we really start to see some wave impacts. Again, a high surf advisory expected around Cape Krusenstern, the northern end of the Seward Peninsula, and then all the way along the Chukchi coast up toward Wainwright. Notice the ice edge is right about here. With that strong push of wind coming in, surf will likely come up to the top of the beach as we head into your Wednesday morning at its worst, and then improve as we head through Wednesday afternoon. High surf advisories are posted there with 30-knot winds coming in from the west and a 9-foot sea. Offshore gale warnings are expected. Thursday, we see conditions improve. 15 to 20-knot winds in all areas there over the ice. 15 to 20, looking at the Chukchi Sea at around 15 knots. Generally becoming northerly, about 4-foot seas to 6-foot seas should be expected for your Thursday. Recapping tonight's weather, a front is moving into the Chukchi coast. High surf advisories continue until Wednesday, 6 p.m. Look for showers scattered across southeast. A little bit better chance of light rain, fog, and drizzle across parts of southwestern Alaska. The front parks across the Brooks Range as we get into Thursday, and warm and dry weather for many in south central and southwest. Have a good evening.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.